In this video, we're going to go over the Payload Builder, which is easy to configure once you have a basic understanding of the components that go into lead delivery. In this case, we'll be setting up a simple direct post campaign in which leads are ingested from a single supplier and then routed to one buyer. But the process we cover here will apply to all different campaign types. To keep this video as short as possible, we're going to assume you know how to build out the skeleton of a campaign by going through the steps in the new campaign creation workflow, including choosing a distribution type, adding your fields, choosing third-party validations, and configuring the dupe checker. We'll link to some resources in the description below to walk you through each of these steps. Once you've completed the initial build-out, you'll add your supplier from your directory of clients or create a new one, inputting the agreed-upon cap and pricing information and adding any filters you'd like to apply to the supplier, such as a profanity filter. We'll repeat the process for our first buyer, either creating a new client or choosing from our existing directory. We'll add any applicable caps, input pricing information, and select any filters we might want to add. Finally, we come to the real-time action page and this gray section, the Payload Builder. This is often the most intimidating part of setting up a campaign for new LeadProsper users, but it's actually pretty simple. These three fields at the top, the posting URL, request method, and payload type, should all be detailed in your buyer's API specifications. If they don't specifically tell you which payload type you should be sending, but they do offer an example payload, pick the type that looks like the example they provide. In a form payload like this, data will be sent as one long string, with each field followed by an ampersand. In a JSON, each field will be in quotes, with the field name separated from the dynamic data by a colon. In an XML format, the static field name will bookend the dynamic data in the middle on either side. Regardless of the payload type, the text in blue is the field name. It's based on the fields you set up in your campaign, and it's essentially a label for the green dynamic data in curly brackets that the campaign will be ingesting and routing. For each buyer you add to your campaign, you'll map these blue field names with the labels the buyer is expecting to receive. For instance, instead of first name and last name, maybe your buyer's expecting to receive F name and L name, and maybe instead of zip_code, they just want zip. All you have to do is change those blue labels and the data will be read correctly by their system. The Payload Builder also allows you to hardcode in certain values specified by your buyer, such as an API key or source code. If a value is hardcoded, that means it will never change. For example, maybe my buyer wants me to hardcode a source ID field with the value 1234. If I type that field in and put 1234 as the value without curly brackets, which indicate dynamic data, every lead that's delivered to this buyer will include the 1234 source ID. That helps the buyer know where a specific lead is coming from, particularly if they have dozens of different suppliers. Any value can be hard-coded in the Payload Builder. If I went to the first name field and typed in John, every lead that was delivered to this buyer would have the first name John. Once the Payload Builder has been configured for this buyer, custom headers are up next. Headers are simply fields in an HTTP request that pass along additional context. Headers in LeadProsper are most often used for authorization bearer tokens or API keys. When you choose JSON or XML payload types, we automatically set your headers so you can leave these blank. Next, we'll outline the responses our campaign should be on the lookout for. You'll need to choose what type of response your buyer's system will send back after receiving your API call. Check your buyer's API specifications, but in a text format, responses will generally look something like accept and duplicate, or maybe success and dupe. If the response will be returned in a JSON or XML format, you'll need to input both a key, often something like status, and a value, both of which should be outlined in your buyer's API specs. And that's it for the Payload Builder. Once you've completed this section and hit Next, your campaign is almost ready to go live. If you've got a few minutes, we highly recommend you watch our video on testing your buyer, which is the last step to get your campaign up and running. If you run into any difficulties configuring the Payload Builder, submit a support ticket, or email us at support@leadprosper.io. Thanks for watching.